what would I say to someone starting their programming career at a web company using JavaScript? Okay, I'm very serious about this. Find a better job immediately where you are not using JavaScript, because this will affect your long-term development as a programmer. The beginning of your career, when you're young and have a lot of energy, is very important. You need to use it effectively because it'll determine your trajectory for the rest of your life, okay? If you start a career at a company that gives you mediocre things to do, you're gonna turn yourself into a mediocre web programmer. That's just what happens, okay? You need to go outside that. Do anything, go work at SpaceX. Go intern at SpaceX and bring people fucking coffee. That'll be better for your career long-term than doing web development at a web company, okay? Again, my rant about imposter syndrome is it's not, so there is a real psychological effect called imposter syndrome, but that's not what everybody on the internet is talking about, right? People on the internet seized that name and used it inappropriately for their accurate feeling that they don't know what they're doing at their job, okay? Most people are bad at their job and don't know what they're doing. That's not a syndrome. That's an accurate depiction of the situation. And so to pretend it's not true, people want to pretend it's not true that they're bad at their job. They want to pretend that they're actually good and it's just a mental issue. It's just confidence or something, right? No, it's just if you're bad at your job and your brain is telling you you're bad at your job, then just pay attention to that and try to figure out how to get better. The more time you spend working in that space of your approximation to the thing that you want, the more time you spend becoming an expert in the field of this specific application that you're making, the better you get at that subfield of programming. And the better you get at that subfield, the better your decision making about technical issues in that field is going to be. So if you make hard decisions later, they will be made better, both by a more skilled person and with more contextual information than if you make those hard decisions early on, okay? So deferring these kind of decisions is actually important for good craftsmanship in some cases. It sounds paradoxical because you would think good craftsmanship is just you see a problem and you like relentlessly solve it whenever you see one, but I don't find it to work that way. For new programmers, what would I broadly say about choosing a career path in programming? The same thing I always say, which is be careful what you choose, especially when you're very young, because when you're young, it's the time when you're really learning and the time when you're still defining yourself. I mean, you're always still defining yourself, but when you're young, you're especially doing that because you have less history behind you. And so if you go somewhere mediocre and you learn from people who are doing mediocre work, you're going to be defining yourself as someone who doesn't do things that are particularly good or particularly special. That's just reality. People don't like it when I say that way, but that just is what it is. That's what happens. If you're lucky, you can break yourself out of that later, but better never to be in that situation. So choose where you work and who you work with very carefully. Because there hasn't been selection pressure on programming culture, whether or not you believe me about whether the current culture is right or not, you could at least expect that there's not that much reason for it to be right. There's like a very mild constraint that your program does kind of have to run, and that's a reality check, but that's getting looser all the time anyway. Like, look at how many more and more programmers are hired just to make a simple program run now, right? Like people spend years at web companies working on individual web pages that are about the complexity of something I would program in BASIC when I was in high school in like a couple weeks or a week or something, right? It's just crazy at this point. I think it's still possible to pivot later on in life to try and pursue what you feel is your true passion while taking a more financially stable choice in the present. No, I think people tell themselves all the time they're going to do that, and then they just age into their financially stable choice. That's just what happens. Um, I think either you're willing to take risks or you're not. And your propensity for taking risks will only be reduced as you age. You'll never, it's not like you get 10 years older and feel like way more radical than you did when you were 23. That's not how that works, okay? When you're 43, you'll have way, way more reasons to be conservative than when you were 23. So if you don't learn to take risks now, you will not do it later. If you have money of any magnitude and you have a theory about how to do something productive, then you should invest that money in your own theory. Because, if you believe it has a good chance of being right, because you're most in control of that, and there are fewest middlemen skimming off of that, right? So the highest return comes from you investing that money in your own idea. So all these things like putting it in an index fund or, a mutual fund or whatever, or bonds, that's all for if you don't have an idea of how to make any money, which is fine for people who don't want to have an idea or don't want to take any risks. But if you do, there are better things to do. The people who succeed do stuff that nobody else was doing because the other people talked themselves out of doing the thing, right? That's the secret that you have to know. Everybody is talking themselves out of success all the time. And I'm not trying to sound too self-help guru-y about that, because self-help people give me the creepies, but it's true. People talk themselves out of success every day. It's weird. Like, why would human beings do that? But they do it. Once you learn to see it, you see it all the time. All right. But you need to stand out from other people in order to really succeed at a lot of things. And people are afraid of standing out from other people, because when you stand out from the herd, you get taken down by a mountain lion or whatever. Right. So people have strong resistance to that. Certain people, other people don't, right? People with high risk tolerance don't have those aversions to the same degree. And so you might be doing that. I don't know. I don't know you. I don't know what your personality is like, but you might be doing that. You might be just looking for ways to not succeed while thinking that you tried your hardest. That is definitely a thing that people do. For me, there's not that much question that I'm going to finish the things that I do, because I've learned the secret of that. And the secret of that is you just do the stuff that you say you're going to do. It's really not hard, but most people don't do it, right? Okay, this is the sad fact, right? Most people are bad at programming. Most people who are good at programming are really busy. They're not usually the people giving you advice about how to program. By Sturgeon's law, almost all advice you'll see on the internet about how to program is bad. So, if you have absolutely no idea how to program, then I guess you go on the internet and you look for a little bit, like enough to get traction. But if you know how to program a little bit, you probably know better than the average advice on the internet. All right. So what you need to then do is get better so that you have enough judgment capability to sift the good advice apart from the bad advice. And the only way to do that is to program. How do you level up as a programmer who's been primarily working with web frameworks? Stop doing web programming. Web programming is bad. It will make you a bad programmer. Stop it. Work on other things in other domains. That is step number one. It's like saying, how do I become a better athlete, when what I do is I sit around with all the guys on the couch with the bags of Cheetos, and we practice throwing the Cheetos into each other's bowl, which is kind of like playing basketball. And it's like, no,